In this episode, we start with a topic that helps explain why so many serious security problems are first noticed not through broken machines, but through people and accounts behaving in ways that do not fit the ordinary rhythm of work. Detecting abnormal user behavior is about recognizing when a person, account, or identity begins acting outside its usual pattern, whether because the user made a mistake, an attacker stole access, or someone inside the organization is doing something they should not be doing. For a brand new learner, this matters because many modern incidents do not begin with a loud technical failure that everyone can see right away. They begin with a valid account logging in at an unusual time, opening files it never normally touches, reaching systems outside its role, or moving data in ways that do not match the user's purpose. Once you understand how to look for those changes, you begin to see that abnormal user behavior is often one of the clearest early warnings a defender can have. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A useful place to begin is with the idea of normal behavior, because abnormal only has meaning when it is compared to something expected. Every user in an organization tends to create patterns over time. Those patterns include when they usually log in, which applications they use, what systems they access, how much data they handle, what devices they use, and what kind of work their role requires. A finance employee, a help desk analyst, a software developer, and a senior executive do not all look the same when they use technology, and that difference is exactly what helps defenders build meaningful expectations. For a beginner, the important lesson is that security teams are not trying to create one rigid picture of perfect behavior for everyone. They are trying to understand the ordinary habits that fit each role, user, and business process well enough that unusual activity stands out when it matters. Without that sense of normal, almost every event looks equally uncertain. That idea leads directly to baselines, which are the practical foundation for detecting abnormal user behavior. A baseline is the understood pattern of ordinary activity for a person, group, or account over time. It may include common login hours, usual geographic locations, known devices, normal access patterns, and the types of systems or records a user typically touches. Good baselines are not frozen snapshots that never change, because people travel, job duties shift, projects begin and end, and business cycles create natural variation. Instead, a baseline is a living reference point that helps defenders decide whether a change is ordinary growth, planned work, or something worth investigating. For new learners, this matters because it shows that abnormal behavior detection is not about punishing difference. It is about recognizing when the difference seems disconnected from legitimate need. A user who suddenly acts unlike themselves may be showing the first sign of a compromised account, a broken process, or behavior that no longer matches trusted intent. One of the most common signals in this area is unusual authentication behavior. Accounts tell a story through the way they log in, and that story becomes more interesting when timing, location, or frequency shift sharply. A user who normally signs in from one region during business hours may suddenly appear active from a distant location late at night, or a service account that should behave quietly may begin authenticating repeatedly in ways it never did before. Repeated failed logins followed by success can matter. Logins from new devices can matter. Sessions that begin in one place and seem to jump to another impossible place too quickly can matter as well. For a beginner, the key point is that logging in successfully does not prove everything is safe. In many real attacks, the attacker is using a valid account, which means the sign-in can look ordinary on the surface. The abnormal part is often in the surrounding context, not in the fact that access was technically granted. Time is another powerful clue because people usually work in recognizable rhythms, even when those rhythms are flexible. An employee may log in early, stay late, or travel occasionally, but most users still create patterns that roughly match their role and schedule. When activity starts happening at highly unusual hours, especially if it involves sensitive systems, large data access, or administrative functions, analysts take notice. A late-night login is not automatically malicious, because urgent work, travel, or maintenance may explain it. The real question is whether the timing fits the person and the task. A developer responding to a deployment issue on a weekend looks different from a payroll employee suddenly accessing large numbers of files at 2 in the morning. For beginners, this is one of the easiest ways to understand abnormal behavior detection. The issue is rarely just that something happened after hours. The issue is whether the time, the user, the type of activity, and the business explanation all fit together in a believable way. Location and device context add even more meaning because normal users tend to access systems from a manageable set of places and equipment. An employee may work from an office, from home, or while traveling, but over time those locations still form patterns. The same is true for devices. People usually rely on known laptops, phones, or workstations that fit their role. If an account suddenly appears from a new country, a new network, or an unmanaged device with no clear business reason, that change becomes relevant. The same is true when a user who normally works from one secure workstation suddenly begins operating from multiple unfamiliar endpoints. For a new learner, this is helpful because it shows how abnormal behavior is often not one dramatic act. It is the mismatch between identity and environment. An account may still be using correct credentials, but if those credentials are now appearing in the wrong place, on the wrong device, or under the wrong conditions, the defender may be seeing stolen access rather than legitimate work. Another major sign of abnormal user behavior is unusual access to systems, applications, or data. Most users rely on a limited portion of the organization's technology environment based on their job. A salesperson may spend time in customer platforms, email, and shared documents. A database administrator may interact with technical systems a receptionist would never touch. When a user account begins reaching resources far outside its normal role, that shift deserves attention. This can include opening unusual file shares, requesting records from a new application, touching sensitive information at unusual scale, or moving laterally toward administrative systems. For beginners, the big lesson is that access itself is not the whole issue. What matters is whether that access makes business sense for that person at that moment. An isolated one-time access attempt may reflect curiosity or confusion, but a sequence of unusual access events may show discovery, misuse, or compromise. Patterns of reach often tell defenders more than individual permissions do. Data handling behavior is especially important because many harmful actions eventually involve collecting, moving, copying, or exporting information. A user who normally views a handful of records per day may suddenly access thousands. Someone who rarely downloads files may begin pulling entire folders. An account that usually reads data inside one application may start copying material into documents, archives, or external destinations. None of those actions is automatically malicious because there are legitimate reasons for audits, reports, migrations, and business reviews. But scale and timing matter. A sharp jump in volume or a shift toward more sensitive information can signal insider misuse, account compromise, or a process that has gone badly off track. For a beginner, this is a practical reminder that abnormal user behavior is not only about logging in from the wrong place. It is also about how the account handles information once inside. If the user is taking much more than they normally need, that change may be one of the clearest signs that trust is being misused. Privilege-related behavior also deserves careful attention because many security incidents grow much worse once an account begins doing things beyond its normal authority. A user may request or receive access they do not usually need, start using administrative tools unexpectedly, or perform tasks that should belong to a different role altogether. Sometimes this reflects a legitimate job change or approved project work. Sometimes it reflects privilege creep that was never cleaned up. In more serious cases, it may show that an attacker has stolen a stronger account or is trying to expand control after an initial foothold. For new learners, the key idea is that abnormal user behavior often becomes most dangerous when it crosses into privilege. A user reading one unfamiliar file may matter. A user altering security settings, creating new accounts, or approving access changes without explanation matters much more. Privilege makes abnormal behavior more consequential because it gives the actor more power to hide, spread, or cause damage if the activity is not caught quickly. It is also important to understand that abnormal user behavior can point to different problems, not just one. Sometimes the cause is a compromised account, where an outsider is using valid credentials in ways the real user never would. Sometimes the cause is an insider acting intentionally outside policy, whether for theft, sabotage, curiosity, or personal advantage. In other cases, the issue may be a well-meaning employee making a serious mistake, such as downloading too much data, approving a bad request, or using an account in a risky way during urgent work. For beginners, this is an essential distinction because the detection challenge is the same at first, even when the root cause differs. The system sees abnormal behavior before it knows why that behavior exists. Analysts therefore have to stay careful. They are investigating a pattern, not accusing a person. The initial goal is to determine whether the abnormality reflects compromise, misuse, error, or some legitimate business explanation that needs to be documented and understood before stronger action is taken. Because of that uncertainty, context is everything. A behavior that looks alarming in one situation may be entirely normal in another if a project, travel plan, incident, audit, or leadership request explains it. Security teams therefore compare unusual activity against change records, business calendars, job functions, manager expectations, and recent events affecting the user. A spike in file access during quarterly reporting may be acceptable for finance staff. A burst of late-night work from a traveling executive may make sense during an acquisition. At the same time, attackers often rely on defenders being too cautious to investigate anything that has a remotely possible business explanation. That is why analysts must balance skepticism with restraint. For beginners, the key lesson is that abnormal does not mean guilty. It means interesting enough to validate. Good analysis asks whether the surrounding context reduces concern or whether the behavior still looks wrong even after legitimate explanations are considered. That careful approach helps protect both security and fairness. Modern organizations often support this work with user and entity behavior analytics, UEBA, which helps identify patterns that differ from expected behavior across users, accounts, hosts, and other digital entities. The value of UEBA is not that it replaces analysts with a magical answer engine. Its value is that it can compare many behaviors over time and surface changes that a human might struggle to notice across large amounts of activity. It can highlight unusual logins, unexpected data access, rare device use, or deviations from common peer group behavior. For a new learner, the important takeaway is that these analytics support judgment rather than eliminate the need for it. The platform may say that something is statistically unusual, but the analyst still has to ask whether that unusual behavior reflects an attack, a mistake, or a real business change. Tools help bring weak signals to the surface. Human reasoning is what turns those signals into a meaningful security decision. One of the hardest parts of detecting abnormal user behavior is managing false positives without becoming blind to real danger. Real organizations are messy. People change teams, work odd hours, forget their devices, travel unexpectedly, assist other departments, and respond to emergencies that break normal patterns. If every deviation creates an urgent alert, the team quickly becomes overwhelmed and may stop trusting the detection process. On the other hand, if the team explains away too many anomalies as probably fine, real compromise can hide in plain sight. For beginners, this is where security becomes a discipline of careful pattern review rather than simple rule enforcement. Good abnormal behavior detection is tuned over time. It learns which signals deserve stronger weight, which kinds of users naturally behave more variably, and which combinations of indicators are most meaningful. A strange login alone may not be enough. A strange login followed by unusual file access and new device activity may be a very different story. When the pattern is strong enough, response matters just as much as detection. Security teams may need to validate the user's activity, review recent authentication events, examine host behavior, limit access temporarily, or isolate affected systems if compromise seems likely. The goal is not to punish unusual behavior automatically. The goal is to reduce risk while understanding what happened. A user may need a simple follow-up question, or the situation may require urgent containment because the account appears to be actively misused. For a beginner, This is important because detecting abnormal behavior is only valuable if it leads to the right kind of next step. Some events need quiet confirmation. Some need escalation. Some reveal larger issues in access control, business process, or training. The abnormal pattern is often the first clue, but the defender's job is to move from clue to explanation without losing the chance to contain real harm if the behavior turns out to be part of a live incident. As you bring all of this together, the lasting takeaway is that detecting abnormal user behavior is really about learning when trust no longer looks like itself. People and accounts usually create habits in their logins, devices, locations, access patterns, and data use, and those habits help defenders build a picture of what ordinary work looks like. When the pattern changes sharply without a convincing reason, that change may point to compromise, insider misuse, or a serious process failure that needs attention. For someone studying CySA+, this matters because many modern attacks succeed by abusing valid access rather than crashing through defenses in an obvious way. The warning sign is often not a broken system, but a user identity acting in a way that no longer fits its role. When you learn to detect that mismatch thoughtfully, with baselines, context, and restraint, you gain one of the most practical and important skills in defensive security: the ability to notice when normal human activity has quietly become the language of risk.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.